Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to our second episode of I Saw a Bird, Audubon's live spring migration show. My name is David Ringer with the National Audubon Society, and I saw a bird today from my apartment window here in New York City. It was an American kestrel, and I saw it a couple times fly back and forth and land on a water tower across the street from my building. American kestrel is a bird that has found a way to thrive even in our densest cities. How about you, Christine?
Hello, I am Christine from Audubon, and I saw a northern mockingbird today, which is really cool. I was sitting in my yard. I'm currently in Dallas, and it just landed on the fence like 2 feet away from me. So that was a really cool experience.
That's a lot of fun. Well, if you saw a bird today, you can drop it in the comments. You can share it on social media with the hashtag #ISawABird. We've got a great show for you this evening. We're going to be joined by a very special guest, actor and Audubon board member, Lili Taylor. We're so excited to have her with us. We're going to be talking about the plants that can support birds in your own yard or even on your balcony. And of course, we're going to be having a lot of conversation about migration of birds, which is underway right now all across the North American continent. So please keep your questions coming, drop them in the comments. We will be addressing some of your questions as we go, and we're excited to be with you.
Cool. So to kick things off, we're going to start with amazing migration facts. And I'm going to pull up something right now. So I'm going to share my screen. So David, I have a question. So as someone who works on social media at Audubon, we've shared this animation before from our friends at Cornell's Lab of Ornithology, and we've noticed that every time we share it on social, we get a lot of likes and comments. So if someone was looking at this animation for the first time, could you just explain what exactly is happening here?
Yes, I love this animation from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And what we're looking at is depictions of the migratory routes of about 100 different bird species that migrate between South America and North America every year. So you can see the date toward the middle of the screen there as the year goes through. And the migration data is drawn from people's observations in eBird, which many of you may be familiar with. And what it does is it takes the average migration path of an entire species of bird and depicts it as a single dot on this map. And one of the things I love about it is that we think of migration happening in these concentrated periods in the spring and the fall. And when you watch this, you certainly see that happening. But I love that there's almost always a bird moving somewhere at any point during the year. So here we are in August, and birds start moving even in July. Some of the shorebirds from the Arctic start coming down. And then everything really pours south in September, October. And then by January here, you can start to see a bird move across the Gulf Coast, probably representing purple martin, which is a very early migrant. And then as we get into April and May, the big pulse of migration starts all across the continent. So I can see why people are fascinated every time you share this image on Audubon social media channels, Christine. I am too.
Yeah, this is really cool. And it's such a cool way to see how the birds, it's like a whole mass. They just move together as like one big unit. So I have another question about migration. How exactly do birds navigate to their destination each year? Is it something that's inherent, or do they learn this?
Yeah, it's a great question, and scientists are still learning a lot about that even today. Some birds do learn how to migrate from their parents and other members of their species. And we know that's true for some of the big water birds. There's some good research in whooping cranes, for example, which actually migrate together as a family unit. So we know that the young birds learn in their first year and even in subsequent years from their parents where to go and how to get there. That happens in geese. We think that happens in swans. So these big social birds definitely teach their young how to migrate. But plenty of birds just have an instinctual drive that sends them where they need to go. So when you think about some of our small, colorful songbirds like warblers and vireos and buntings and tanagers and flycatchers, none of those birds, for the most part, as far as we know, have parents that show them the way. So they just take off when they're ready as young birds that have hatched that summer and find their way to their nesting ground. That's also true for a lot of shorebirds, in which case we know their parents don't show them the way, because when you watch shorebirds coming south in the fall, sandpipers, plovers, godwits, they actually, the parents, the adults, leave the nesting ground before their young are able to fly and make those long journeys. So the parents say, see ya, we're out of here, and head south. And they leave those young birds on the nesting ground to continue growing and getting ready for their own migratory journey. And then when they're strong enough, they head south as well. So we know that those birds are doing it based purely on their instinct and navigational abilities without any help from their parents who are long gone.
Wow, that really adds another idea to the empty nest syndrome. I can't imagine having, like, being born with that ability to navigate, because I have the terrible navigational skills. So I really admire birds.
Amazing,
so
right?
I gotta know. Yeah. So in your opinion, what is the most impressive bird migration? Big question.
There are so many. Yes, a big question for sure. You know, I will pick two, and both of them are smaller songbirds. Some large birds have amazing migrations, but I think about the black-polled warbler, which is a bird that winters in South America and then nests all across the northern part of North America in the boreal forest. So from the maritime provinces of Canada all the way to western Alaska and a few places in the northern United States. These beautiful birds spend the summer. And when they get ready to fly south for the fall, scientists have found in the last couple of years that they do something nobody really thought was possible. What they do is they all fly east across the continent to the east coast of Canada and the United States, and then they just launch themselves off over the Atlantic Ocean and fly for up to 3 days without stopping over the Atlantic Ocean until they land on the northern coast of South America in Venezuela and Colombia. So you have a bird that weighs about as much as a pencil that is able to not only navigate itself, but survive that 3-day journey across open water, where obviously there's nothing to save it if anything goes wrong. But this is a successful strategy for an entire species. And I think that that is one of the most spectacular feats in nature. Another one that I'll mention quickly, in Alaska, there's a thrush-like bird called a northern wheatear. And nobody knew where they went for the winter for a long time, but scientists recently found that what they do is they fly across the Bering Sea into Asia. They migrate all across Asia and down into sub-Saharan Africa, thousands and thousands of miles. And then in the spring, they do it back again. They come back from Africa all the way to Alaska to nest and raise their young. So, you know, again, a small bird, a songbird, and I think the fact that these tiny little animals are navigating and surviving these immense journeys is just one of the great miracles of the natural world.
Yeah, that's really cool. I didn't know that about black-polled warblers before. That's such a cool fact. So it sounds like migration for birds, it's an extremely, both physically and mentally demanding task. What I'm curious about is, how do laws like the Migratory Bird Treaty Act help these birds who are migrating and beyond?
Yeah, you know, humans' awareness of bird migration dawned slowly over several centuries. In medieval Europe, people knew that birds left for the winter, but they didn't know where they went. And so there were these wild theories in the literature of the time that maybe the birds flew to the moon, or maybe they buried themselves in the mud at the bottom of ponds like turtles and frogs do to survive the winter. But gradually we started to learn more about the fact that birds are moving across the globe. And in order to protect them, that means that we have shared responsibility across state boundaries, across national boundaries, to understand where the birds are going and how to protect them. So in the United States, in 1918, we passed a law called the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. It was shared responsibility with Canada, and then a couple years later with Mexico, and now with several other nations that acknowledge that birds cross all of our boundaries, and we all share a responsibility to protect them. So the Migratory Bird Treaty Act makes it illegal to kill or harm birds, to do things like taking their nests. And that law has been in place for more than a century now and has saved numerous species and helped keep some of the birds that we know and love alive and common to this day. Unfortunately, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act is under attack. So you can learn more on the Audubon website about what you can do to speak up for this really important law that acknowledges the amazing journeys these birds take and the responsibility that we all have to protect them. So good questions, Christine. And we've got lots of questions and comments coming in from our viewers. We want to share a few of those with everybody. So some sightings for the day. You heard that Christine's was a mockingbird, mine was an American kestrel. Catherine tells us that she saw a sharp-shinned hawk today. Bit of a tongue twister for me there. Joey saw a violet green swallow, which is one of my favorite birds out west. Just this brilliant lime green, a little bit of purple and bright white underneath. And Mary saw a painted bunting, another beautiful, beautiful, colorful bird. So it sounds like you all have been seeing some great things today. Congratulations.
Yeah, these are all great birds. I actually saw a swallow today as well. It was a barn swallow. It was another bird that flew overhead when I was in the yard. So that was really cool. So we actually have a question from a viewer named Lori. They ask, are the migrations happening at night mostly? Key West NOAA radar seems to pick up thousands of birds, and they shout up like precipitation on radar picks up. So the question is, are the migrations happening at night mostly?
Yes, so a lot of birds do migrate at night. It appears to be safer for them, and there's some evidence, although scientists are still studying this, that the position of the stars and the moon may help with birds' navigation. But they can still navigate on cloudy nights, so we think that they can also sense the Earth's magnetic field. But in any case, yes, most of the small, colorful songbirds that we're all familiar with, the warblers, the flycatchers, the painted bunting that one of you saw today, the swallows, they actually take off at sunset and fly all night long, and then about sunrise, they find a suitable place to settle down for the day, rest, eat, drink. So one of the ways that we've learned a lot about this is, as was pointed out, through weather radar, because radar detects particles in the atmosphere, whether those are small things like raindrops or larger things like birds. And so we can actually visualize bird migration by seeing bird movements on radar, which is really, really cool. And I think in a couple of weeks here on I Saw a Bird, we're going to have a scientist on from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology who does a lot of that work and can talk with us more about it.
Mm-hmm. So another follow-up question, do extra cold or extra warm winters affect migration, or will it affect when I see these birds?
They certainly can, yes. Some birds are what we sometimes call half-hardy migrants, which means that they only move as far south as they need to continue to find food and to keep their body temperatures where they need them to be. So if a winter is milder, that means that on Audubon Christmas bird counts, we might find more gray catbirds, we might find more blue-gray gnatcatchers, things like that, where the birds don't necessarily go any farther than they have to. But in a harsher winter, those birds might not stay and they might go farther south. But in other cases, you know, like the black-polled warbler, for example, they're traveling thousands of miles. And so they are going to make that migration regardless of what's happening with short-term weather fluctuations.
Got it. Okay, cool. We have a lot of great questions. So as a reminder, anyone who's tuning in today, feel free to drop your questions in the comments and we'll try to answer them throughout the show.
Yes, please do. And remember to share your bird sightings on social media with the hashtag #ISawABird or #IHeardABird. So now we want to move into our next segment. We're really excited to welcome back to I Saw a Bird, Audubon's Vice President for Content, Jenny Bogo. She's going to be walking through our new Audubon for Kids activities this week. And I think her special guest, Jody, is back with us as well. Hi, Jody.
Yes, that's right. Hi.
Hello, Jody.
This is Jody. Jody, would say hi. Hi. Can you remind everyone what grade you're in?
I'm in 3rd grade.
3rd grade. And it's looking like New York City schools are probably going to be closed for the rest of the year. So Jody and I are on a mission to find even more fun things to do during the day, especially this week. This is spring break for Jody. especially since we're stuck inside because we live in Brooklyn and so we're spending a lot of time inside our apartment. Luckily for us, Audubon has a whole network of environmental educators who think a lot about how to connect kids to nature. And so my team at Audubon decided to work with them closely to build a page to help shine a spotlight on some of the cool activities and lessons that Audubon has for kids. So let me share. Oops, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can everyone see that? So this is our Audubon for Kids page. Every Wednesday, we're going to add content around a different theme. You can see we're on week 4. This week's theme is really all about native plants and birds, and it just causes kids to think a little bit more deeply about some of the food and shelter and things birds need in order to survive. So we scroll down. A lot of this content, some of this content is based on Audubon Adventures, which is actually a classroom curriculum that's created for kids. It looks at a lot of science and math concepts through the lens of birds, but we worked with that team to adapt it into lessons that parents and kids can really do at home without a lot of resources and a lot of extra materials. So for example, the first theme for the first activity for this week is I Spy Something Wild. And Jody's been helping us test out a lot of these activities. So Jody and I and her little brother went for a walk around our block in Brooklyn today and basically looked for any plants and animals and insects we can find, right? So what name some of the things we saw today in our walk?
We saw a lot of sparrows and of course a lot of pigeons.
Yep.
And we didn't really see any robins because we didn't go to the park. We saw a squirrel and some flies.
Yeah, some classic Brooklyn wildlife.
And we saw some grapes.
Some grapes. Jody pointed out if we'd gone into Prospect Park, which would have been a smart move, we might have seen the yellow warbler that we saw yesterday.
But at least we saw grapes.
We saw grapes. There's always that. So there's this I Spy game. There's this cool how to grow plants made with either newspaper or toilet paper tube rolls. There's also this neat crossword puzzle we created this week. And I'll just show you this real quick. The very first clue is this worm-like creature will turn into a butterfly or moth if a bird doesn't eat it first. We have a pop quiz. Who will get this first? Jody or Christine and David? What do you think? What's the answer?
It's a caterpillar.
It's a caterpillar. All right. So you can do this
right.
fun quiz.
Good job, Jody.
Don't need to print anything. We also have other things built right into the site, like these flashcards that show you what different birds need to eat at different times of year. And we have galleries of photographs. We have activities like making seed balls. We have quizzes you can do right on this site, which is neat. We have a recurring theme every week where you get to learn to draw a different bird. This week's bird is an American goldfinch, and a really well-known illustrator and ornithologist, David Sibley, creates a 5-minute video for us every week in order to post here. And so you can learn how to draw a different bird every week. And you can download a coloring sheet if you want to color it too.
So Jenny, we have a question from the audience actually. Amber wants to know, what age group do you think these are best targeted for?
That's a great question. Audubon Adventures, I believe, is targeted more at the 8 to 12-year-old group. However, we made a point of putting a lot of adaptations into the lessons. So if you're working with kids, as our family is, we have a 2-year-old in our household. So we've created a lot of tips for how to adapt these to a younger audience. Jody, who would you say was better at observing the wildlife around the block, you or Emerson?
Me.
Yeah. But
And it was like, not a ladybug, not a ladybug, not a ladybug.
Okay, and then we will show you as well. We just want to dip really quickly into the last week's lesson, or last week's theme, which was migration, because it's really fun. It also talked a lot about the things birds need to thrive. And we'll tell you, because Jody and I have a hot tip on this one. So we're going to point out really quickly the migration-friendly window decorations, which are basically creating, using puffy paint or glue to create your own puffy paint to make decals for your windows to help birds, prevent birds from colliding into them, right? Jody, what did we learn about using transparent glue?
It's hard to see when you're gonna color it, and you might just do it on the plastic part instead of the glue.
So we recommend using white glue. We happen to have approximately 10,000 gallons of clear glue in our house from past slime making activities. But if you have white glue, that is the way to go. And we want to show you this really neat game that Alex Tomlinson, who's one of our designers, created. And it basically follows different birds' migration paths. So you get to choose between 5 different birds. Jody, which one did you want to choose?
I chose a Peregrine Falcon.
Okay, so we're going to follow the Peregrine Falcon.
Choice.
Yes, so it starts out in the Amazon rainforest in Brazil and chases and captures a parrot in Venezuela, South America. It stops to wait out a thunderstorm in Guatemala. It lands on an office building in Houston, Texas. So you can see it's navigating all these different interesting challenges on its migration. It's mobbed by a flock of common grackles in Wynwood, Oklahoma. Fortunately, it escapes that situation, lands on a tree in Nebraska, and is spotted by a group of birders. Chases and captures a duck, Lucky Falcon, in a pond in North Dakota. And then it finally makes it to Saskatchewan, where its nesting grounds are. And you can play through this with 5 different birds. I want to point out really quickly before we leave you that we do produce Audubon for Kids in Spanish every week. So you can see we have the first 3 themes already posted in Spanish. We want this resource to be as inclusive and as available to as many families as possible. So that also is updated every week. And then one last thing I wanted to share with you is that today we actually posted a really nice essay on our website that talks about how at this moment in time, it's a really nice opportunity for kids actually to become birders and learn to appreciate to bird. You know, a lot of families and a lot of kids have a lot more time now to take walks and slow down and really make observations. That's really great. Also, birding gets kids away from screens. Our family is getting a lot of screen time now, so it's nice. A lot of families have access to, if not a backyard, you could walk around the block like we did. Sharpens their powers of observation. Also, it's important to note nature can be really calming influence, and I think at this time in particular, that's a really important benefit for both parents and kids. So that is on our website. If you go to audubon.org, you can find that story there too today.
Really terrific. Thank you so much, Jenny. Thank you, Jody. Great job. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Have a good night. Well, for all of the children in your life or you kids at heart, I hope this is a helpful resource to you. As Jenny said, keep checking every week for new resources at Audubon for Kids. So now we're super excited to welcome our special guest for the evening, Lili Taylor. You may recognize her from her award-winning turns in movies, television, and the stage, maybe American Crime, Mystic Pizza, 6 Feet Under, The Conjuring, and many, many other projects. So it also happens that Lili Taylor is a fabulous birder, and she's on the board of the National Audubon Society. So Lili, welcome. We're so glad to have you with us tonight.
Hi, I love those activities. That question about what age are they for? They're for any age. I am going on to all those activities.
Exactly.
Those are fantastic.
Anyone who's a kid at heart.
Great.
No, not even a kid at heart. Even if you're an old crabby person, that activity is for you.
Very true.
I love the migration game.
I do too. I love every single thing. I'm going on right after I get off. Hi, guys. Your show is great.
Welcome.
I saw a lot of birds because I'm actually 2 hours upstate. I'm 2 hours outside of the city. But I saw an eastern towhee. David, correct me.
Towhee, yes.
Okay, towhee.
Yeah,
Okay,
beautiful bird.
Yeah, and what was really cool was I saw it and I know he had just gotten in that morning because he was sort of stunned. He was probably starving and he was kind of like, I would imagine after you finish like the New York Marathon, if you're like stumbling after, he was like kind of like, and then I had some seed out. He ate some seed. He ate a little more. And then he was like, then he was great.
It was good to
So
go.
That's great.
That was great.
It really does sound
Love
like
it.
a marathon. It's basically a marathon of birds when they fly so far to their destination. That's a great metaphor.
I mean, I bow in deference to any bird that migrates. And I have so much respect.
Yes, it's true. Well, Lili, so, you know, we know people will have questions for you, but
Sure.
let's start with the basics. How did you get into birds?
You know, what happened is I've always liked birds a lot. I mean, I loved them. They were great. But I wasn't really paying attention. And something happened over time where I guess I started shifting from like just the sense of hearing to actually listening, which means paying attention. And it was kind of like, wait, when I think it happened with a blue jay, and I heard a sound and I was like, wait a minute, you're a bird. You're making a sound. You're not just this sort of general Disney sound as from a bird. It's like you're really something, and you're communicating to something. And from there, it just was like a deepening, I guess, a paying attention. It was like I spy, but on a deeper level, not just like I spy. It's like, oh, I spy. Like,
Right.
I'm really taking you in now. I'm taking you in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I love that.
that
It's like
story.
I
It's
spy and I
awakening,
listen.
right?
Yeah, exactly. And you know something? It's like, it doesn't matter where you live. It's like you can watch the behavior because there's always something going on. Birds aren't random. There's reasons why they're doing things, even pigeons. And I've grown to really like pigeons. Because I'll take something interesting anywhere I can. If all I've got is sparrows and pigeons in the city for the most part. You had a kestrel, I can't even believe that. I wish, but for the most part I have pigeons and sparrows. But go and look at them, and there's some interesting stuff going on. Pigeons, I found out, do all this interesting stuff. Like they make a sound with their wing actually when they flap up or something. Like David, do you know some of this pigeon stuff?
Yeah, they do. A lot of pigeons and doves, when they fly, they can move the air through their wings in a way that signals each other. So it's not just their voices. They can use the movement of air around their feathers to communicate as well. It's amazing.
That's cool. See, I just found that out, and then I was trying to listen for it. So watch pigeons, watch sparrows, watch anything that's living. You'll feel better.
All birds are beautiful. Pigeons are beautiful. There's so much diversity in them too, just like looking at their wings and the iridescence in them. So
Exactly.
I love that. Like any bird is just great to observe. So Lili, I have a question for you. So
Yeah.
obviously you're very passionate about birds, but you're also passionate about native plants. My question is, what got you into native plants? Was it birds or was it the other way around?
Audubon got me into native plants with their great plant finder and database. And it's so easy. You just put your little zip code in and you can find out what birds are near you, what plants they like, and where the nearest place is to get those plants. So I all these things that I thought were weeds, I realized are not weeds at all. They're actually, they're profound and they're natural and they're here. And I don't know who the hell started calling them weeds, but so I'd heard that Joe Pye weed was great for birds and butterflies. And so I got some, and it was resting on the ground. I was about to plant it. I had seen a monarch butterfly flying around over the backyards in Brooklyn, and it was kept trying to find places to eat. And it was landing on what I now know are exotics or alien species. And there wasn't any food for them. And I rushed down, I planted the Joe Pye weed really fast. And then the monarch fluttered and it landed on the Joe Pye weed and it started eating.
That's awesome.
Come on, man. I mean, that was like a dream. How much clearer can it get?
Perfect.
I love that story.
Yep.
We had the chance to work on a video last year, and it was a great honor and opportunity. It was actually featuring your backyard in Brooklyn, where you have a lot of native plants. So I love that story about the Joe Pyeweed. I can pull up this video real quick where you actually shot this video of
Not that
the
one.
butterfly.
I shot
there
that.
It is, yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, that I shot. It's blurry.
No, it's great. It's like
that's it, man. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the little monarch that was starving. Actually, that's on swampweed right now, I think. Ironweed, excuse me. I mean, weed. That thing is gorgeous.
And then your birds.
You know what's so great?
feeder.
You know what's so great about native plants? They're so easy. Because they belong here, you don't really have to do much at all. And even if you have just a little balcony, just get a container, get a native plant. They're cheap. Plant it, and you'll have a little bit of food, because a little bit can do a lot. They found that just a little bit can help a species out a lot. So it's not all for naught. That little plant you have on your balcony will help out a starving bird or butterfly or squirrel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And you were talking about listening before and the beauty of listening to birds. So as an actress, I've heard you compare acting and bird watching because they both require great listening skills. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah. So listening is paying attention, and it's also a skill. Listening is a skill. And so it can be practiced. And I need to practice it because I'm not very good at it, actually. I'm rarely listening to the actor that's across from me. I'm just hearing all this stuff in my head. And I'm actually really not even listening to the bird. I've got all this other stuff going on. And so it actually makes me more aware of all the things I've got going on, everything going on except taking in that thing that's in front of me. So what's great is being so aware of how I'm not listening. And so then I can just stop and then just listen and really look at the bird instead of trying to name it or trying to say, oh, I think it's this, or I bet it's doing that, or try to be an expert with myself. Like, why am I trying to make all these assumptions and like labels, and why can't I just take the thing in and watch it?
Yeah, I love that. It's such a good point.
It's great. It's great because the great thing is you can always keep trying to listen. You can't really fail at it. You can just realize, ooh, I have to listen better.
Yeah, it's such a good point. I think it's a lifelong practice, and being into birds really gives you a lot of opportunity to practice that skill. Mm-hmm. Lili, we have some questions coming in from our viewers who are really excited to have you with us as well.
Bring it on.
Yeah, so the first one is from Amber, who wants to know whether you have a favorite bird song or call.
What's that thing that the one in I think Africa that blends into like a stump? Like it's that wild looking, it's that really haunting.
Are you thinking of a potu from Latin America?
Yeah, potu.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. That's a great one. That is a wild jungle sound for sure. Good choice.
Everyone has
another
a task.
Favorite.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Look up the potu, and I will too. Go on.
I love it. And those birds kind of look like cartoon characters when their eyes are open. It's pretty funny. So if you want to Google potu, P-O-T-O-O, you can see what we're talking about or listen to their call. So we have another question about one of your favorite things, Lili. Michael wants to know, what's your favorite native plant?
I'm kind of loving Joe Pyeweed. I'm kind of loving it. Because it sort of works for everybody. It works for everybody. It holds a lot, like you can also like rate plants on like how many species they can feed, and it's pretty high up there. I think it can like feed like 70 different types of things. You know how like the oak tree feeds like 435 species?
Right.
Pyeweed is up there in terms of flora, or fauna, whatever the hell it is. Is it flora?
That's great. Flora.
Flora.
Okay.
Flora are plants and fauna are animals, yeah.
Thank you.
It's a good choice. Joe Pyeweed is really beautiful, a nice late summer plant that adds a lot of color and, as you're saying, provides so much value to wildlife. So another question for you from Julie, who wants to know what motivated you to serve on Audubon's board?
Wow. Well, I was just so impressed. I mean, most actors, we don't get asked to serve on boards. So I was just so impressed that somebody wanted me in a professional capacity. David Yarnold. I mean, it was like, board, of course, you know. I mean, and I love Audubon. It's like, and it was beyond an honor to, you know, I mean, I'm the one who has to ask a lot of questions about some of the words in that board meeting, like development. I didn't know what development meant, because in my world, development means working on material, like building a script. So I didn't know what, like, so I'm getting caught up on, like, you know, smart words, but it's been an honor. And it was David Yarnold brought me in.
That's great. And David Yarnold is our CEO. He's a great leader for the organization. And I get the opportunity to be with Lili in our board meeting settings. And Lili, the creativity and passion that you bring to our business and negotiations are fabulous. So thank you. So we have from Austin, Lili, this isn't a question, but I think it's just awesome that you're recognizing the importance of native plants. Thank you. So. Yeah. That's from Austin. I agree with that. I will ask you a question quickly, Lili. So before we move on to our next segment, which you're going to stick around for, but you've got a number of projects you're working on. And I understand you've been working on an adaptation of an old favorite television show that's going to be coming out soon. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what's happening in your career?
Sure. Yeah, I just finished Perry Mason, which is going to be so cool. HBO did it, and it's going to be fantastic. And it's not like the Perry Mason that grandma loved with the lawyer and it's not that Perry Mason. It's very, very, Perry just got back from World War I, and he's messed up. And he's in Los Angeles, so it's that noir, you know, he's kind of got some problems in his mind, and he starts doing a little detective work, and I'm someone he starts having an interest in because I may have done something maybe not so good. So that's that. I think that's coming out in July. And then I was about to start work on something called Outer Range, an Amazon show, but quarantine. So
yes, now we're in quarantine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thanks for that update, and folks can look forward to Perry Mason in July.
Is that when it's coming out? Is that what you heard?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay. Well,
I don't know. I don't have any inside scoop on that, but we'll look to you for that.
Okay.
Well, I'll stay tuned.
Okay.
I imagine that a lot of things are in flux in the studios, just like the rest of our lives right now. So, yeah. Well, thank you. This is great. And we're going to keep talking with you, but we're going to bring two more guests in as well. I'm excited to introduce.
Off, right?
No, stay with us. Yeah, stay with us if you want. We're going to keep talking about native plants.
Okay.
We're going to bring in Dr. John Roden, who's Audubon Senior Director for Bird-Friendly Communities based in Los Angeles, and also Marcos Trinidad, who's the Audubon Center Director at the Dubs Park Audubon Center, also in LA. They are both great birders and plant enthusiasts. So we'll join the conversation with you two here. Great to have you both. So John, let's start with you. Hey, Marcos. So John, Audubon has a program called Plants for Birds that we heard Lili reference. Can you tell us what's the link between plants and birds? How are those things connected, and why does it matter?
Sure. Well, it's great to be here. And I couldn't have had a better intro than Lili's overview of the program. Yeah, really in a nutshell, plants obviously provide lots of things to wildlife. Food, shelter, places to nest. All of those things are important plant contributions to birds. And any plant can really provide that. The connection between birds and our native plants are really very directly tied to breeding, because when birds are breeding, regardless of what they eat as adult, the vast majority of birds feed insects, and particularly caterpillars, like we're in that crossword puzzle. to their babies. And there's actually an interesting link between plants and caterpillars and the insects that survive on them because they've co-evolved together. And so when we're talking about native plants, why they're so beneficial for our native bird species is because of that co-evolutionary process, which means that our native plants support so many more of our native insect species. And so while all plants can provide things like nectar and seed and nuts and things like that, really that baby food is what's really important with our native plants. And so we are promoting the use of native plants across the country. We have some great resources like Lili referenced.
So you've used this word native plants a few times. Can you tell us what it means for a plant to be native to somewhere?
Sure. So when we're talking about that in the United States, principally we're talking about plants that were existing here pre-colonization. So the plants that existed and co-evolved with those insects over time so that they can act as great hosts for them. So that's the important connection there. There, again, are lots of great plants, and I am sitting here in my backyard in Venice Beach, California. So you may be able to hear some of the traffic noise around here. And I will be 100% honest, we've transformed a lot of our yard into native plants, but we have some non-natives too. We have a lemon tree, for example, because we love lemons, right? And those sorts of things. So we have a combination of plants. And one message I really want to convey to people is that, and people have talked about this before on this call or on this webinar, is that even small amounts of native plants help, right? Insects will find them, birds will find them, and so that's important. So I have a question, actually, for Marcos. Hey, Marcos. Marcos is here in LA with me. He's on the other side, sheltering in place over there. But Marcos is the center director at the Audubon Center at Debs Park, as David mentioned. And Marcos, how do plants and native plants factor into the work that you're doing there at this center with your team?
Hi, everyone. First off, I appreciated all the pigeon love and dove love. It's great. Another quick fun fact, we might need to fact check this, but at one time, pigeons were the only bird with a Medal of Honor. So that's another cool thing we could look at. This was the courier pigeon. So the way that we use native plants is one, mainly for our ability to perform restoration. And when I say restoration, that's really restoring the connection to people back to our land. And what we have been able to look at as one of those amazing tools are native plants. We have a native plant nursery. We have opened the doors in a way that all of our community members can come in and be a part of the whole process, from seed collecting, plant propagation, to helping us manage a nursery, a native plant nursery, learn the process, learn everything that goes into taking care of these plants. Then we actually put them in the ground. Then they can come back and learn how to care for them in the grounds. And what we do is we're able to also continue the data collection and science that goes behind what we're seeing with pollinators, what we're seeing with birds, to really track that. One thing we also have noticed that native plants have typically, like for us, have been an introduction to conservation. It's like the first step that folks really get into, because flowers are beautiful. Flowers bring this amazing just energy and this feel around, and the more flowers we can and I say flowers in that sense that, you know,
very subtle, but there's just this appreciation with everything that goes around with the native plants.
That's a really good point. I like how you compare native plants to just a way to get people into nature, kind of like the way birds are. So I have a question for John, actually. So since spring migration is on all of our minds, what can the role of native plants do to help these birds and when they're making such a great feat?
Sure. So I have overall responsibility for the bird-friendly communities conservation strategy at Audubon, and one of the things that we think about is providing food, shelter, safe passage, and places to raise young for the birds that we share our communities with. And so native plants can provide all of those things. And certainly, as we've talked about on migration, it is a really arduous journey, and birds are traveling through the area and will be needing to actually restore and refuel and fatten up as they're continuing on that journey. So native plants are an excellent way to provide those sorts of resources for the birds that are traveling through on migration. And one point again to make really clear about this is I do have a yard here and we've done a lot of work to put in native plants, but you don't need to have a lot of space to actually participate in this because birds are traveling through by the millions and hundreds of millions and through all of the landscape, whether it be rural, urban, or suburban. And so wherever there are opportunities to put in plants that can support both provide resources and support insects, anybody, anywhere can participate in that. And so I want anyone who may be listening to see themselves as that they can contribute to this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, even in those dense urban places, a few native plants can be helpful to birds, and as Lili, you were sharing, to other pollinators as well. So you talked about, Lili, how putting a single plant in your yard brought a monarch into your yard in Brooklyn almost immediately, which is such a great story. And John and Marcos, I'm wondering if you can expand a little bit more on that value of native plants in urban spaces, like Lili shared with us a few minutes ago.
Do you want to start, Marcos?
Yeah, I could just, throw in what we're looking at, especially in an area like Los Angeles, is the value is really the ability for these birds to have a break and a stop in an area that is where they're able to gather food or take a break or find some cover. I have often looked at our urban forest as a break, and when we have a number of homes that have the potential to add native plants into their space, or like we were saying, if you don't have a lot of space, containers, the process of making this addition is going to help these birds so much, and it will go in again with pollinating and seed propagation and being able to contribute to that.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that a little bit, right? There are data that show that even small patches of native plants, again, like on fire escapes or balconies, patios, whatever, insects will find those and will lay their eggs on them, and those caterpillars will then be produced, and then birds will find them. I mean, these organisms are really driven to be finding these opportunities. So obviously we really strive for connectivity of habitat when we're talking about restoration and providing good habitat, but even small pockets of habitat can have real value in the urban matrix. And I think that that's something, again, everybody should see that they can play a role in this because they can.
That's great. It's the ultimate, if you build it, they will come. So some of our viewers might be seasoned gardeners, getting excited about this. Some of them might be thinking about gardening for the first time, whether it's because they're stuck at home for a while or because they're excited about bringing more birds into their lives, or both. So we actually want to hear from both Lili and Marcos what kinds of tips you might have for new gardeners. And Marcos, let's start with you.
I think, being in California, our native plants are very different. One thing with our type of climate, Mediterranean climate, we can grow a lot. So we see like a variety of different plants. And again, I was talking about these really showy plants that people love to purchase at these larger nursery chains. One thing when we look at native plants, we'll have to start to appreciate the full cycle of the plants. And because there are these horticulture practices, we have to remember that caring for native plants, it might take a different approach. And one tip that I always give is the process of deadheading. And deadheading is looking at a plant. If you have a plant that blooms, that has its flowering, and once the flowers die, typically what a lot of folks do in a horticulture practice is they'll go over and they'll cut the dead flowers. And then the plant will start to look green or showy again. What that does is actually eliminate the full cycle of the plant and how it's providing habitat. So after the plant flowers, which pollinators are able to go and have nectar and seed is occasionally spread as well, those will dry up and a lot of them will produce seed. If you cut that dead flower out, then you're actually eliminating one of the most important cycles of the native plant to provide seed for native plants. And when it goes into a time when birds are creating nests and using plant material to build these nests, a lot of that old plant material is actually easier for these birds to break off and then gather and use for building shelter. So again, that I think would be the biggest tip that I would give out there is watch your deadheading.
That's a great tip. Watch your deadheading. Lili, how about you? You got into gardening with native plants because of birds. What have you learned and what would you say to others?
For me, it was just keeping it really simple. I think there's a couple of basic plants which are kind of keystone species plants, like the sunflower, the asters. Those are those sort of daisy-ish looking flowers. I mean, it's a huge family, but we see them a lot. And there's one more. And so I kind of just worked with those. And I tried to think about like shrubs that were maybe last a little longer into the fall for those birds that are coming through that are really hungry and there's not a lot of food. Like I think the chokecherry is a shrub where it can provide, and it's also really, there's a lot of protein, I think, or something in the berry. Like Virginia creeper is another pretty good, and that's a really easy vine to grow. So I was trying to think of good food sources, keeping it really simple, and things that might come up early or stay later for those stragglers that are hungry.
Can I jump in with one gardening tip as well, which is good, I think, for kind of lazy gardeners, and I don't mean that pejoratively at all, is that leaving leaf litter around is actually a really great thing. The majority of moths, when they lay their eggs and their caterpillars develop on plants, that's obviously great bird food, but to complete that life cycle, we need those to actually develop into moths, and the majority of them actually drop down into the leaf litter to finish their development. So actually leaving your leaf litter, not making your bed super tidy, is actually a great thing to do as well. That will help that complete that life cycle and give you a little more free time back.
Mulch is magic.
Thanks for those tips. So we want to recognize another viewer who's giving us a shout out. Lisa from San Diego is watching tonight, and Lisa is on the board of the Audubon chapter in San Diego. She's also the faculty advisor for the San Diego City College campus chapter. We have a relatively new Audubon program that has chapters on about 100 college campuses all around the country. So we're really glad to have Lisa and maybe some students from San Diego and all over the country with us tonight. Thanks for that. And one of the things they did there in San Diego was to put native plant gardens on their campuses, on their campus rather, and then run a science program to see how birds and pollinators responded to those new gardens.
That's
so
awesome.
Thanks for being with us, Lisa. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a couple more questions. On the native plant site, it says that 96% of terrestrial bird species in North America actually feed insects to their young. So the question is, when we plant these native species in your spaces, do you also eliminate the need for pest control or pesticides?
I can take that one, I think. So one of the things, obviously, if we're planting native plants, and we're doing that as at least partially so that we can produce bird food for our our birds, our native birds, we don't want to use pesticides as at a first step, right? Because that's going to affect those insects. It's going to be detrimental, and there's potentially follow-on effects from that, from the use of those pesticides. So one of the things about native plants too is that they have evolved with these insects that feed on them, and so that they're totally used to that level of being browsed on, and it doesn't hurt them, right? And so they may not look quite as manicured and beautiful as plants that are more resistant to the insects, but it's a totally fine situation for them. So yes, the bottom line is you don't need to use pesticides. You shouldn't use pesticides. And if you have more native plants, you can actually reduce your pesticides use, which is better for the environment in lots of ways, water table, all of that.
That's awesome. It just speaks to all the more benefits that native plants provide. So there's another question from Nicholas. If someone grows native plants where there weren't any before, how do birds and pollinators find them? Do they smell them? Do they see them?
You want to take that, Marcos?
Sure, I'll give it a shot. So when I share nature with everyone at the center, I typically look, as you're making these observations of birds, they always seem like if they have somewhere to go. They're very busy. They're moving quick, and I feel a good I think way to look at it, if you were to walk into a grocery store and you would take a quick glance around, you would be able to tell where the produce is, where the spirits are, where the frozen food department is, where the cheese is, just by a quick glance. And a lot of this is our association with colors, brands, logos. When birds are looking around, and when we have our little feathered friends looking around, they do the same thing in nature. They have this ability to look at these different shapes of trees and the color of the bark and plants as well. So that's what they're able to do, because it's literally their grocery store and their shelter, their home. So a lot of it is able to be looked at in that sense. And I think for us as an education tool, that was the closest thing we can get to as being able to share that type of experience. John, if you want to add on to it, be more than willing to share it.
Sure. I think the only thing that I would add is that, as birds are moving through areas and they have a territory, they're looking for resources. They're really, they're surveying, they're spending a lot of time trying to find it. So it may not be immediate, but I know that when we planted, to Lili's example, right? These organisms are actually really actively looking for the food that they need to help them survive and thrive. And so when we put in our native plants in our backyard, almost immediately birds started showing up, other pollinators, butterflies started showing up. And I do think that there is just this natural need that they have to actually be surveying everything that they can in their local area to try and find those resources.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. And I love that analogy of the grocery store, like they're going grocery shopping when they're flying. So Lili, we actually have a question for you. So one of the viewers wants to know, do you have a favorite movie that has a bird in it?
Oh boy.
Another big question.
I'm stumped. I could say The Birds, of course.
It's a good classic. Yes, well, that's a good one. So as you can see, both John and Marcos are outside in their sunny LA living spaces. And John, as he mentioned, has a lot of native plants in his yard. And so John, I think you're gonna walk us around and show everybody some of your plantings.
I am gonna try and do this with my computer. So please bear with me. I'm gonna give you this view because I'm gonna try and do this this way. So we're here in LA. We are sort of at the end actually of our winter rains. And so we're some of our flowering plants are kind of on the the tail end of their flowering, and others are kind of coming in. We do have plants that do flower during the summer, as Lili was mentioning, you know, sort of having the continuity of a planting. So I'm going to show you a few here. I'm going to try and do this. This is a plant called, is this going to even work? I don't know. This, if you can see this.
We can see it, yeah.
Okay, great. This is a Ceanothus, which is, there's a number of Ceanothus that grow across the country actually, but here in California, we call them California lilac. And you can maybe see that kind of lilac-ish flower on that. It's a great plant for pollinators, and those flowers then lead to berries, which then birds will feed on. And it's a very dense plant as well, and so it's a great plant for California quail. Our state bird actually nests in it, not in my yard, I will be honest, but in other parts of the state, they do that. This is a plant called the Cleveland sage, if you can see this, which is, I'm trying to get the flowers in it. This is an early flowering plant here. We do get a lot of flowers here in the summer. Another species that's great for pollinators, hummingbirds love this. And to Marcos's point about deadheading, this is an important one. I'm gonna get the morning glory out of that grows over from our neighbor's fence. Leaving those seed heads on is really important because things like bush tits, the house finches, mockingbirds, I've seen all kinds of birds that come in here and actually take advantage of those. And this, I know we don't have tons of time. I could spend all day looking at my native plants. This is one of my very favorites. This is a coffee berry. And you can see it has really tiny flowers on it right now. Those are great for pollinators again. They will then lead to berries that look like coffee, as I've mentioned. They are great for things like cedar waxwings. Mockingbirds, again, love them. And then I'm just going to show you two others that are right here. These are in pots. So this is a red buckwheat here, and there's a Dudleya behind it. And I wanted to include these because those, as we've mentioned, they, you don't need to have a yard, right? And those do great in pots, and they produce flowers. The Dudleya actually produces these great flower spikes that hummingbirds take advantage of. So those are just a few of them. And I will also mention, here is my Plants for Birds sign, which normally is in my front yard, so people can see it. But I brought it out here so you can see it. You can get this on the audubon.org website to show that you actually care about and are putting native plants in your garden. That's a brief tour.
That's great. Yeah, thank you so much, John. So Lili, as a fellow backyard gardener on the other coast of this country, how would you rate John's gardening?
I mean, they're lovely. They're beautiful. Those plants are so beautiful. Native plants have such they're so humble in a way, but if you really take them in, they're just stunning. Thank you, it was great.
That's great.
Thank you.
I agree. Well, Lili, we want to say thank you so much for being with us tonight. Thank you for your service on Audubon's board. We know how much you love birds and you give so much back to protect them and help people fall in love with them the way you did. So we're thinking of you there in quarantine. We hope you and your family are safe and folks can look forward to the new Perry Mason coming out sometime this year. We'll find out when. But Lili, thank you so much for everything.
Thank you. And anytime you need me back, I'll be back. And I should have said Up. One of the watchers mentioned Up, the movie Up with the bird, Kevin.
Oh,
so I
that's
should
a
have
good
said
one.
that. Really,
That's a really good one.
Up is one of my favorite movies, so I was remiss.
So hard.
You guys are great. Thank you.
Thank
That's great.
you.
Thanks so much, Lili.
Ciao.
Ciao. So next up, we have a segment that I'm excited to talk about because I'm also a photographer and videographer. So we are going to invite Audubon's photography director, Sabine Meyer, to talk about the native plants category of the Audubon Photography Awards. And John, I believe you were a judge in this category as well, right?
I am. I lobbied to have Plants for Birds included as one of the photography categories, and we were successful last year for the first time. So I've been a judge. This is my second year doing it, and it's fantastic.
Awesome.
Hi everyone, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. It's been great so far. I just wanted to chime in a little bit. John, yes, you lobbied. We also, it is very true that Audubon's core mission for a very long time, 100+ years, has been to protect birds and their habitat. So when we created this category, this plants for birds category, it was also sort of a way to reflect on this kind of dual core mission and you know, invite photographers to submit images of birds in their natural habitat and a native habitat. So we last year, it's true, had our first set of winners, or at least one winner for this Plants for Bird category. And maybe we can share that picture so you can all see who took the prize for this Plants for Bird category last year. John, if you want to tell us about the bird and the species.
Sure. So this is, and this was clearly one of my favorites, and it was the winner in the category. This shows a female hooded oriole on a California fan palm. So this was actually taken in a backyard in San Diego. And you can see that she's collecting that those fibers from the plant, presumably, right? She's doing some nest building there. So I loved this photo because it not only showed the interaction between the plant and the bird, but it's like it just really illustrates the importance of native plants for birds in a whole variety of ways. You'll see some other photos that illustrate that as well, but I really loved the way that this captured that interaction so beautifully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, I love that picture because there's so much going on in it. It feels like it's kind of messy, but at the same time, there's all these beautiful lines, you know, the fan palm leaves in the back and all the little twigs that this female oriole is bringing in. The important thing to say here is that it is taken in someone's backyard, and you know, there's a lot that we can see in our backyards these days. You know, I know a lot of us are sheltering in place. Some of us don't have actually access to a backyard. Some of us don't have access to maybe even a park or forest, or even a view of a tree outside of one's windows. So what we decided to do is to take you on a very quick virtual walk outdoors with a collection of photos of kind of favorite photos of plants and native of birds on native plants. And we collected these from our favorite images that were submitted last year in the Plants for Bird category in the Audubon Photo Awards. So this one was our honorable mention in last year's contest, and turning it over to you, John, if you want to tell us about the species and the native plants.
Sure. So this is actually a purple gallinule on what's called a fire flag or alligator flag, which is a native plant around water in Florida. And one of the things that you hear is that if you want to find gallinules, look for fire flag, and it's a really important food source for them. So like one of the things I loved about this photo is that you can see that this bird has been foraging, and it has actually a little bit of the flower in its beak there.
Yeah, the other really sort of, to me, the great feature of this image is also the fact that this gallinule has really large toes, and there is one of the fire flags kind of set in the toe, and that sort of, you know, goes back and forth between the beak and the toe, and that was a really sweet detail that helped the picture. The other thing to mention also is the photos we're looking at for our contest and our Plants for Bird category. It's very important to note that the plants should be native to the area where the photos are taken. So we take great care when we get these entries to sort of assess that native factor, and John is our expert in residence, and he's actually working really hard right now looking at the 2020 photo entries. So check out your magazine in July, and we will be publishing all the winners also online in July. So heads up on that. So should we go to the next picture, maybe?
Yeah, let's see it.
Yeah.
So this is a rose-breasted grosbeak and an eastern redbud, and obviously a beautiful color combination there. And yes, Sabine, thank you for reiterating that point that one of the things that we do in this category is ensure that both the plant and the bird are native to the place that the photo was taken. This was taken back in the eastern part of the US. Just a really beautiful shot of a gorgeous bird, obviously.
Yeah, this is really sort of a riot of colors, and again, there's lots of lines going on in this picture. And you know, one other thing that's important to note is that a good picture is often prepared before even getting into the field. You know, it's super important to study the actual bird species that you think you saw in a tree and you want to go and photograph. It's important to, in this particular category, to study the native ID of that tree. Is it native? Is it not? So, you know, photography is skills, but it's, and being outdoors and taking the picture, but is a lot of research that goes in, you know, before you actually set out in the field. So that's important to always remember. Let's go to the next picture.
Ah, yes, another gorgeous one. It's so great to see. I never get tired of these photos. It's amazing, right? This is a Baltimore Oriole on a Tulip Poplar. And what you can see is that this is another, this is a case of nesting here. So there is the nest in the center of the photo. Orioles, as you may know, build hanging nests that they weave into the branches there. And it also does look like the bird has actually an insect in its beak, which it may be feeding to its young there. And so there's just a great story here of the interaction of the bird with that tree and the importance of that to its life cycle.
Mm-hmm. To me, the key word there is nest. So nest, photographing nest is something that is to really be approached super cautiously. You know, we really want to promote and elevate photos of birds in natural habitat when also we know for a fact that, or we hope that the bird, the species hasn't been harmed in the process of taking that picture. So nest photography, photographing nests comes into this category where it's important, again, to know the behavior and also stay far, practice distancing, really, and use a long lens. Make sure you're not gonna, you know, disturb the parent feeding the chicks if there are chicks in the nest. And again, that sort of goes back to do your research before you get out in the field, and also make sure you never sacrifice the safety of the bird for a good picture. That's you know, the thing that comes first, the safety of this bird. We have a great online guide to ethical bird photography that we can post in the chat box. That's you know, has a lot of great resources and pointers. So if anyone is interested, it's a great way to look at these sort of not rules, but, you know, suggestions. There you
go. So this is a cactus wren on a cane cholla, a type of cactus. And yet again, another one that there's a nest construction aspect to it, the structure to the right there. And then also this bird has, it looks like a big juicy cricket in its beak there. I just love this, again, telling that story of the importance of this plant as structure, as, you know, potential food, all of that. And if it needs to be mentioned, the cactus wren is the state bird of Arizona.
Yeah, this photo we love because the color palette is so sort of muted and beautiful, and there's this really messy one side of the picture and a very quiet and clean, left side of the photo. So it's sort of like this dichotomy of peace and busyness, and of course, we always love it when we see pictures of bird with big critters in their beaks. That's and you kind of barely see it there. So we love that. Yeah, let's go to our last set of pictures.
Yeah. So 2 lovely shots here, Cedar Waxwings with Eastern Red Cedar on the left, and then a Prairie Warbler with Mountain Laurel on the right. And just lovely shots. Obviously, the catching the Cedar Waxwings in that group, foraging on that one in mid-gulp of a big juicy berry, and then that the Prairie Warbler just singing its heart out there with the beautiful Mountain Laurel in and around it is just another gorgeous shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Johnny said it all. This is all about perfect, decisive moments. There's a famous photographer who coined that expression a long time ago, but it means patience. Lots of sort of making an amazing bird photo is about really patience and taking the time to let this picture come to you and again, sort of be there at the right time and click to capture that. It's really, really difficult to get great groups of birds also where, every single bird in the picture is perfectly sort of choreographed around the frame. So the Cedar Waxwings on the left really hit all these notes. That was really exciting for us. So yeah, that sort of wraps our little quick walk, virtual walk outdoors. A lot more of these pictures are actually available in an online photo gallery that's on our website, and we can share that. All the images, like I said, were culled from last year's submissions in our Plans for Bird category. And the website, the story on the website has a lot more information about the species, about the native plants that support these species, and of course, the name of all these great photographers that took these photos and share the joy of birds with their work. And they make us look good. We could not look that great without them. So sort of a shout out to all of them.
Yeah, these are such beautiful photos. So thank you, Sabine and John, for sharing these. It's such a great way to see how native plants add another element of depth to a bird story.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I could keep watching, but just like all those migratory birds, our time is also flying. So we want to close out with the segment that we call, If You Do One Thing for Birds This Week. So if you do one thing for birds this week, we want you to look up, using Audubon's online tool, what are some plants that you could plant where you live to help birds. So John's actually going to help us out by pulling that up on the screen, but while he does it, we want to ask for your help. So we're going to look up a couple zip codes and see which plants can help support birds where some of you live. So if you want to see your zip code featured, drop it in the comments, and we'll pick a couple of zip codes. As John pulls up the website here, we will do a search and see what we get. So this is what the homepage looks like. It's a very simple interface. I think we've got a LA zip code there.
That is,
we will see what's coming in.
It's pre-populated, yes.
Yes, so okay, we've got one coming in from Joni, and the zip code, John, is 42301. 42301.
Okay.
So we'll look up Joni's zip code here and see what we've got.
Right. So it looks like that is, as Joni will well know, in Indiana. And the nearest, one of the great things about, so Lili talked about this a little bit when she was mentioning our database, but we want to direct people both to resources and to the plants and to the birds that they'll support. So right here, it tells you what your local Audubon is that can support you. And then the first tab shows you the best results. You can do lots of filtering. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm not going to do this, but there are filters that you can pick whether you want different types of plants, different types of resources, the birds you might want to attract. There's great trees. You can, like, let's just see if we wanted to find, Orioles, let's just say. Oh, well, that's great. So the basswood is a great tree for that. There's other things that, again, for the resources that these plants provide, will support those species. So this is all fantastic. These are great plants for that part of the country. And I will point out this tab as well, the local resources, which again points you to what your local Audubon is. And then I know that there's been some question in the chat box about where to get native plants. And so this tab actually shows you where you can get native plants in that local area. So that's the sort of quick tour of the database.
That's great. So the link to try this for yourself is in the chat from Audubon. We're going to try a couple more here just to get some variety. So John, we have a zip code from Maryland, and that zip code is 20120. 20120.
Okay. Well, interesting. So this is in Maryland, you said?
No, the person's name is Maryland.
Oh, sorry. This is in Virginia. So this is located next to or near the Audubon Society of Northern Virginia, which is a great resource for native plants. I've worked with that chapter quite a lot. You can see that there's actually a larger number of best results here of 143. But again, there's different species. Service berries are Amelanchier. That genus is a fantastic resource for birds across the country. There are different kinds of Amelanchiers that produce berries that are great. Dogwood's another really good bird supporting plant. Produces great fruit. Insects love it. So those are, and the American basswood, which has, again, sort of a wider range and extends back east too. Should we try another?
Great. Yeah,
I can do this all day.
Service berries are wonderful. Yes, we could, but let's do one more. This one is from Gabrielle, and the zip code is 76021. 76021. Thanks, Gabrielle.
Oh, looks like we're now in Texas.
Woo.
Awesome.
A whole other country.
Yes, exactly. Oh, so the American Beautyberry, a really fantastic food source for birds. You see those gorgeous, and one thing you can do is you can click on these photos and you get a larger view of them. So these beautiful purple berries are a great food source for birds. That's good. The American elm, that's an interesting one, right? Because elms have been under threat and subject to some challenges with Dutch elm disease. Pokeweed, another one that, as you know, Lili so eloquently stated, why are these called weeds? But this is, the pokeweed is actually something that does produce these fantastic food resources for birds. So yet again, we can see there's some great options here on the database if you happen to be in Texas. That's not far from you, Christine.
Yeah, Fort Worth is just like 20 minutes away from Dallas, so.
Awesome. Maybe you should put some pokeweed and beautyberry in your yard.
I will.
That's great. Well, thank you to all of you who put in zip codes. Again, you can check the link in the comment section for try this for yourselves. If you do one thing for birds this week, please check out the plants that'll support birds near you and maybe make a plan to get some of them in the ground or in pots where you live. So unfortunately, we've come to the end of our time. We do want to close out with one final question to all of our remaining guests, which is, which bird are you most excited to see this spring migration? Sabine, why don't we start with you?
I'm very excited to see this little guy of a ruby-throated hummingbird that has been visiting. So I hope she will be back.
That's a great one. First hummingbird of the year is always a good sighting.
Mm-hmm.
John, how about you?
So So I live in Los Angeles, and unfortunately the beaches are closed right now because of the situation, but I do monitoring of the California least terns every year, which are a threatened species that nest on the beach here. I'm really excited to see California least terns return and to actually be able to go and actually see them at the beach.
Yes, and we know that like you and all of us on the webinar tonight, a lot of folks are staying at home to keep themselves and other people safe. So we hope all of you are well. We're thinking about you wherever you are. And for me, birds are a reminder of what it's like to be free and the joy that we are looking forward to in the future. So my bird that I'm looking forward to is a Blackburnian warbler. I live in New York City, and that's a bird that we see not every day, but certainly every spring migration season. I get to see a few of them. They have this brilliant orange throat that almost looks like a glowing ember. It's so bright, and it contrasts with kind of their black head and white belly. So for me, that's always a sign that May is here and that spring is well and truly underway. So I'm excited to see my first Blackburnian warbler this year.
These are all great species. So I'm in the Central Flyway, and I would love to see an indigo bunting this year. That'd be really cool because they have such brilliant blue plumage. So I would love to see that here in Texas. So yeah, this concludes today's show. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. And just a friendly reminder to you all out there, if you see a bird, feel free to share on the social platform of your choice with the hashtag #ISawABird. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.